What's going on, Adonis?
What up, my man? How you?
I'm good. How you doing?
Man, wonderful, wonderful. How's things going your way?
Trying to stay productive as best as we can.
Right, right. I
Yeah.
know. Locked
Appreciate you
up,
for
but
yeah, but appreciate you for taking the time out for
oh,
this.
for
It's been a
sure.
minute, but you have so much history. We talked extensively with B Cox about his career
Yeah.
last week, and we got to get Adonis. He has a historical, legendary career as well, so we got to get through everything.
Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate that. This platform is really, really cool too. For everybody just to, to be able to get their word out and say what's up to the people. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Well, we definitely want to highlight everything you've done, just
Mm-hmm.
because you've done a lot. But I want to get started here. Of course, you did some behind the scenes work with Black early on, but a lot of people know you from your time, especially with Bad Boy. That's where you got your start,
Mm-hmm.
for a lot of people. So I guess when you first got to Bad Boy, and at that time, there's so much talent in the studio in that camp. Who was the first writer, producer, or artist that made you realize, like, I got to get to that level?
Immediately, probably Mario Winans.
Mm,
When I first, well, my manager at the time, he was super, super familiar with Mario. So
yeah.
when we walked in the studio, he walked into Mario's room, and Rio was like, "Yo," it was happy to see each other. They hadn't seen each other for years, and
Right.
so coming from Atlanta, I had always worked with producers that weren't on the level yet, but they were really talented, right?
Right.
And so when I got into that building and I saw how he was working and the way the drums sounded, and I had never heard sounds come out of a speaker like that, like the way
Mhm.
he was mixing. I don't know, bro. It was nuts. It just made me feel like, okay, I gotta really, really, really up my level. Like this is not like I can't come in here and be playing with these guys. They're gonna kick me up out
Right.
of here.
Yeah, and especially during that time, Mario Winans is there, Stevie J is
Oh
there as
yeah.
well. And these
Oh
guys, they
yeah.
can pick up any instrument and just go.
100%. No question about it. 100%.
Crazy.
Yep.
Yeah. So one of the earlier placements for you during your Bad Boy era was Jennifer Lopez. Right out the gate,
Yeah.
Jennifer Lopez, you're in the studio, you're working with Mario Winans and Diddy on the song. At
Yeah.
that time, how hands-on are you with the record, or are you kind of playing second fiddle to these guys, or do you recognize right away that you gotta step in and give it what you have to offer?
Well, Puff is the type of guy. He does not believe in handouts.
Okay.
And so the story is a very long story. I'm gonna try to shorten it. So
Right.
when I first got into the studio, Puff had me. Now this is my first time meeting him. He had
Mm,
me waiting to sit down and meet him. So then he walks in. We're in his office, which was in Daddy's house. It was in the back of the lounge. We're in his office, and he puts this beat on, right? And he tells me, "Yo, can you write to this?" I'm like, "Okay, cool. Who for?" He said, write to it for a girl. Cool. So I write the song. I got maybe the first verse and a little bit of the hook out. It's about 15 minutes later, he comes back and he's like, all right, let me hear what you got. So the beat immediately comes on. It's like, boom, 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 boom. And I say, I know that you want. He stops and he's like, that's trash. Terrible. No, write it again.
Wow.
Word up. Right. So I'm like, okay. Like, you know what I'm saying? So he tells me to write it again. And on his way out, he says, listen, Playboy, I know you're not used to that, but I can't treat you no different than I treat everybody else. Write that shit
Mm,
again. Okay. All right, cool. So now I'm thinking about like, yo, this is my opportunity. This is my chance. You know those moments in life where we say, if I ever had the opportunity to do X, Y, and Z, I would blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean?
right.
I'm thinking this is that moment and I'm messing it up. I'm not stepping up to, my full ability and not stepping up to the plate. So he comes back in another 15 minutes. I got the entire song written.
Mm,
And so I sing that song to him. He's just staring at me, right? Like mean mugging, like, you know what I mean? I sing the
yeah.
whole song through. He asked me to sing it again, and then he calls Jennifer into the room,
Mm,
right? I sing it to her. He asks her if she likes it. She says yes. And then he says, "Yo, can you know how to work? You know how to work Pro Tools?" And I'm like,
mhm.
"Yeah, I didn't, but I was like, yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
I do, yeah." He was like, you know how to work an SSL? Once again, I didn't. But what do you think I said? Absolutely, 100%. I know how to
Right.
work at SSL. Yeah, of course I do. So then he was like, all right, cool. You recording that on her tonight.
Wow.
What? So, he puts me in the studio. I record the joint on her. The engineer helps me set the SSL up. And, that was my first Bad Boy experience. It was cutting that record on her. Corey Rooney was sitting in the back. Corey was always her vocal producer. This
Mm,
particular day, though, I think Puff wanted to know what he had with me.
mm,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
And so, they let me live. And I cut the record on her that night. It was Walking on Sunshine.
Right. No, your vocal production, I was going to get into it later, but it's
Mhm.
top-notch vocal production. That's, I feel like, is one
Thank
of
you,
the
man.
underrated aspects of just a producer is being able to guide a singer through all that. And I feel like you have that to the highest level.
Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So,
Go ahead.
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I think that's something that has always kind of been super important to me because the art of storytelling through song is something that's really, really, really important and is vital to conveying whatever the emotion is that the songwriter wanted to convey through their lyrics, right? So
Right.
if you can't bring that vision to life, sometimes the artist isn't able to tap into whatever it is that was written for them. They just like the song. And so
Right.
you have to tell them, this is the emotion. I need it to sound like this. I need the person to feel this when you say that word, cry when you say that word, shout when you say, you know what I mean? It's just
Right.
that kind of thing about trying to capture whatever the songwriter was trying to put forward. That's really what it is.
Mm. Now, you mentioned earlier, like we know Diddy he's a genius. Um,
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And you mentioned earlier you wrote a record initially. He came out and told you it was whack.
Yeah.
And Diddy's opinion is just one opinion, obviously.
Yeah.
But when you look back now at that first version you did, would you consider that to be whack, or was it just not up to what Diddy was looking for?
This is what I've learned about the music industry in general. I've been doing this 20 years, man. I think that what most people want is usually what you have to. So let's say this, right? What type of car do you like? You
Right.
like you like just say if you like a BMW, right?
Sure.
Does
Yeah.
that mean like a Toyota Camry or a Benz is whack? No, it's just that
No.
that's what you like, and so you
Right.
have to get past where if I did something they don't like it, that just means that they had a different vision. It doesn't mean that what you did wasn't good. It just
Right.
didn't carry out the vision that they saw when they first said, "Oh, I have this idea." And I think
Right.
that's what I've learned because originally when people tell you, "Nah, I don't like it," you take it personal when you're young.
Right.
You know what I mean? And then as time goes on, you start to realize, oh, okay, that just means that they heard a different idea. So let me just try and figure out what they heard. And that's it.
Right. Well, let me flip the script. What about this? I'll give you this scenario. What
hmm
if you write something you think it's whack, but they
hmm
think it's good? Like
That's,
that
ha-
that's
that,
that's different.
yeah,
That's
no, that's
different.
happened to me a bunch. And
Yeah.
a lot of times, I'll be quite honest with you, bro. The very first time I heard my boo back, I wasn't
Mm.
sure. I wasn't sure about it. I wasn't sure. He was 100% sure. I love it. That's it, nigga. That's it. I think he played it like 15 times back to back to back. I was like,
Right.
wow, I guess he really liked that joint. I don't know. Like, you know what I mean? That happens a lot. Sometimes, you miss it. But something I learned about, songwriting from Babyface. This was, I used to work with him for about 2 years. And he said that whenever you feel like a song is not good, you got to
hmm
write through it anyway. Go ahead and finish it out. Get that
Mm.
energy all the way out because if you think the record isn't good, that's okay. But on the other
Yeah.
side of that energy is a hit record. So don't
Mm.
stop. Don't stop that energy. Get it all the way out. And so you can receive the next energy, which is more than likely probably going to be a hit.
Right. I love
Real
it.
talk.
So it's time to go back to your history a little bit. I got to give
hmm
you a shout out first of all, as we're talking about the Bad Boy records. Faith Evans, Don't Cry.
Yeah.
Whew, that's a bad record right
Thank you,
there.
man. Yeah. Now my guy B Cox, he is like, it's my brother. I think he joined in here too. What up, B Cox?
Yeah.
Um, I met B Cox when we were both 19 years old. He already had Get Gone out. So he was the toast of the town already at 19, right?
Hmm.
And I played him, and I was like, yo, I've been writing a couple of things up there for Puff. I can play you some stuff I wrote. And I remember playing that for him. He was like, yo, he went nuts. The sample, because of course Brian is a music historian, so he knows original records and where records came from and how the sample was an Outkast and Goody Mob record. And, you know what I mean? So I think that record kind of forged our relationship later on. And we just became super, super close after that.
Right. Now, two of the biggest records that you did early on in your career, I Need a Girl Part 1 and Part
Mm-hmm.
2,
Mm-hmm.
I think in another interview you told me that those were kind of done around the same time.
The
So
same
kind
day.
of take me through the origins of those two songs.
Okay. So again, back to Mario, right? Mario
Yeah.
was doing his album, and he didn't have a first single. He had done majority of the album. He was trying to make a single. And so he had the I Need to Go the he had the original part 1 in the studio, right? In Studio A. So he
Yeah.
goes over there. He's like, yo, bro. And shout out to Jack Knight and Lowdown too. We all kind of had a hand in both records. So the four of us are the guys that really did both of those records. But so he calls us over there, yo, this is my idea, blah, 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 whatever, whatever, right? So we do that joint. We doing all the ad libs, yeah, yeah, yeah. All them ad libs, all that kind of stuff, right? We get the record done.
Yeah.
We present it to Puff, right? Puff comes over. He's
Mhm.
like, yo, this joint is crazy, son. Oh, this joint is crazy, right? So Puff was like, yo, I got to get on this joint. I got to get on it. So Mario was like, all right, cool. Hop on it, right? I don't know how it turned from Puff hopping on it to it being his record, but that's neither here nor
Right.
there. So that's neither here nor there. So Puff gets on the record, right? And then Usher is coming down the hall. Not many people know. I grew up with Usher in Tennessee.
Mhm.
So Usher is coming down the hall to record it. I don't know, I guess he happened to be in New York. I don't know how that all happened, but so he comes down the hall, he sees me. We hadn't seen each other since we were like 17 years old. And he's
Mhm.
like, yo, what's up, bro? Blah, 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 blah. And he's like, yo, is that you singing on that song in there? I'm like, yeah. Oh, I knew that. I knew that voice, right? So Usher goes to record the record. So Mario was like, all right, cool. This ain't my record no more. No problem. I'm gonna go to the other room and make another one. So my man Frankie, who's playing the guitar on the joint, they go into Studio B. I go down, down the street to get something to eat. I come back. Mario got
Mhm.
right. He got that joint playing. So I'm like, woo, this joint is crazy, right? So we record that. I get the hook. What I need is a pretty woman, right? Do all of that. Puff comes in to hear that joint because the way we used to create, Puff used to always approve everything. So,
Mhm.
literally they're over there in Studio A recording the other one. Puff comes over to this room, to Studio B, to hear this one. And he's like, yo, this joint crazy. Yo, I got to get on this joint, man. Like, yo, this joint is out of here. So Puff hops on that one, takes it, and then puts Genuine and fortunately for Rio, he was able to stay on the record, which was good for him
Mhm.
too. And then
Yep.
obviously Rio had that heater come out that was his single. I don't want to know if you
Of
play me
course.
right.
Yep.
So then he put
Yep.
that heater out, and all was right in the universe. But we did both of those records an hour behind each other though.
That's crazy. And
Yeah.
the thing is, both songs became hits,
Oh yeah.
which is
Yeah.
unheard of.
Oh yeah. And so
Yeah.
crazy thing, right? So I still wasn't signed to Puff yet.
Mm.
So I had never like heard a record that I've written where like a bunch of people liked it. So it was around my birthday. Me and Puff's birthday are 3 days apart, right? So Puff takes the record from the studio, goes to the club. We go to Spa. This was when Spa in New York was still popping. We go to the club. He drops the record like 5 times back to back at the club. Plays I Need a Girl Part 1 in the club, straight from the studio, right? And
Right.
when I'm watching all of these people like singing the ad libs and Dog, it was the greatest feeling I ever felt, bro. To like see people singing something that came from me, and dog, it was nuts. And you know,
Yeah.
Puff had champagne. He's like, "Welcome to Bad Boy, baby. You are now officially part of the family. You got your first hit." Boom, boom. Like, dog,
Wow.
it was one of the greatest moments of my life, man.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
And for me, when I listen to both songs, obviously both hits, I feel like I think I Need a Girl Part One was bigger at the time, but there's something about Part Two that has just made such a huge impact culturally. I don't
yeah,
know what it is about. I think it may be the production. I don't know what it is, but
possibly.
Part Two,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, was a
possibly.
crazy record.
Yeah,
Yeah,
nah, them joints was knockouts. Them
yep.
joints was knockouts.
So 2003 comes along. I gotta give you a
Hmm.
shout out for working on that Latif project. I don't know if Corey's in here, but did some amazing records in there. And then of course you did the Beyonce record,
Yep,
Summertime.
yep.
We'll talk about that song a little bit.
Summertime was almost kind of an accident. So
Okay.
Ryan Leslie is still a good friend of mine. Shout out to Ryan Leslie. He was about to sign to Bad Boy at the time, and you know, Puff had put him in a room. He was actually signed to one of Puff's producers, who was a hitman, right? And so the guy was like, "Yo, I'm telling you, I got this kid. He's dope. He's trying to decide whether he should go to college or just so people don't get it twisted. Ryan Leslie is probably one of the most intelligent human beings on this planet.
Yep.
He
Yep.
graduated Harvard at 16.
Right.
No cap. That's no
Right.
cap, right?
Hmm.
So Ryan got a crazy head on his shoulders. So he was trying to decide whether or not he was going to go work for J.P. Morgan or
Oh
be a
wow.
music producer. And so this song was kind of like, if this works, then I'll do music. If not, I'm gonna go to this interview tomorrow at J.P. Morgan and Chase. You know what I'm saying? So Puff called me and that was like, "Yo, Beyonce wants to do a solo album. This is strictly under the books. Nobody knows about this. I want you to write 2 records for her." Cool. So one of those beats, well, actually, one of those beats was Ryan Leslie's beat, "Keep Giving Your Love to Me," and then the other one was Stevie J and Mario. That was "Summertime," right? So I wrote
Hmm.
both of those back to back because Beyonce was on her way to the studio, so we had to have something to present. We didn't have nothing to present. She was gonna be in
Right.
the studio in 2 hours, right?
Hmm.
So she's coming, boom, she comes in. Me and Puff in there, we play her both records. She falls in love with "Summertime," right?
Right.
So I left the second verse and the bridge open. Her cousin, Angela, I don't know if everybody's familiar with Angela. Angela and Beyonce, they both wrote the second verse and the bridge,
Mhm.
right?
Okay.
So cool. Everybody's happy. I vocal produced her. Vocal producing her, like the three vocalists that I have enjoyed vocal producing the most is her, Brandy, and Christina DeBarge. Those three
Mhm.
vocalists, whatever I tell them to do, they can do.
Right.
It's the craziest thing ever. So, did that record. Jay-Z was calling up to the studio. He wanted to hear the record. This is when they first was, starting to date. You know what I mean? So Jay comes up. He hears the record, and he's the one that actually suggested that we put a rap on it. And then Ghostface came by the studio. Puff was playing Ghostface some other records. Ghostface steals the CD from the studio, right? Goes back to Wu-Tang studio, put his verse on it, and throw the joint on the radio.
Right. Love it.
Yeah, yeah, man.
So 2004 rolls around, and you got multiple placements on multiple Bad Boy projects. Mario Winans,
Yep,
New Edition, Carl Thomas. At
yep.
this point, what clicks for you, or what does Diddy see in you at this point that makes you get on all these placements?
Um, Ultimately, I think because well, it's kind of unfair because I lived with Puff for about 4 years, right? In my
Oh,
first 4 years of Bad Boy. So I like we on the way home we would discuss what records he wanted me to fix, or I want you to change this verse, I want you to fix this hook. So I kind of was tuned into his ear. You see what
mm,
I'm saying?
yeah,
And so I was able to really figure out sometimes something that I may not have a place I may not have naturally went, but because
right,
I know that's what he would want to hear, that's where I would go. You know what I mean?
right,
And that's how really I built that relationship with him, where he was like, "Nah, nah, just let Adonis write it. Yeah, nah, give it to Adonis, give it to Adonis." It became that kind of thing. And I think that ultimately that's what led to all of those placements coming back to back to back to back like that, was because I just was watching what made him tick. And I tried to write that every single time he gave me a beat to write to.
Mm. So one of the projects that came, like I mentioned, that New Edition project. Let me ask you this.
Hmm.
Obviously, we all grew up, we love New Edition. As a
Yeah.
songwriter, producer, how do you kind of approach working with a group like that that has so much legacy and history to it? Do you
Yeah.
try to put your own stamp to it? Let's say, for example, with this project, did you try to put your own stamp to it, or was it just trying to follow the New Edition blueprint?
Nah, well, I every guy who's a songwriter, and most of my guys can admit to this. All the guys that are in my generation, where
Yeah,
we was '90s babies. Um, what I mean by that is like we were teenagers in the '90s. We
right.
all grew up on New Edition and Boys to Men and Jodeci. Those three
Yes,
groups kind of shaped who we are as songwriters, and we all was in groups and sung those songs. You know what I mean? So I kind of knew the anatomy of New Edition anyway. You know what I'm
right.
saying? And so when I went in, credit to them, they gave me the keys. You know what I mean?
Mm,
They said, "Listen, man, we old, you young. Whatever you tell us to do, that's what we gonna do." And I said, "Okay, cool." And so at that point, I basically tried to do what I know that they naturally lean towards. You know what I mean? But also giving them something that would be relevant for somebody that was my age. Them guys is 20 years older than us. You know what I
right.
mean? So trying to give them what I felt like would work for them now, but not straying too far away from what their natural aspiration was as artists. And
Mm.
that was fun being able to do that with them. I got really cool with them to the point to where they would joke and say they was gonna kick Ricky out the group and replace him with me. You know what I mean? Because me and Rick was the same height. They would be like, "All
Right.
right, Rick, you keep on. We're gonna kick you out the group. Put Adonis in the group." It was a fun time with them guys.
I love it.
Yeah,
So, along with your songwriting is your production as well. A lot of people don't know that you make tracks as well.
yeah,
You did that on the Latif album, but
yeah.
the Orion album as well and the Ciara joint. We'll talk about that one in a sec. But what I love about your production is it's simplistic. You're not adding a lot of different sounds, a
Yeah.
bunch of different things. It's just very straightforward. Just talk about the production aspect of your career.
Um, I don't know if JD knows this or not, but uh, like my spirit producer animal, if you
Mm.
want to call it that, is Jermaine
Yeah.
Dupri.
Oh
Um,
wow.
yeah. So I always this is what I felt like. Like Teddy Riley is the guy who we all aspire to be. You know what I mean? Babyface is the songwriter we all aspire to be. You know what I mean? But when you realize that there are things that you just cannot do musically, you know what I
Mm.
mean? Then you try to find something that's more in line with what you can do and what you're good at.
Right.
And what I realized I was great at is a bop, a jam, like you know what I mean,
Right.
sitting stuff in the pocket. And JD is the king of taking five sounds, a kick, a 808, a clap, a hi hat, and a guitar sound, and making that thing sound like it's jamming Lewis or Quincy Jones or something. He's the
Right.
king of that. And so I just naturally was like, okay, well, I can do that. I can do that. I don't have to be. I play piano, but I'm not the best piano player. You know what I
Right.
mean? I'll never be able to make a record sound like how B Cox naturally can just play piano with his eyes closed. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I
Yeah.
can't play like that. So I got to figure out how to make my music sound dope and
Hmm.
still, utilize what I'm great at. And the
Right.
the thing that I'm the best at, I think, when it comes to production is I don't produce and then write to my beats. I write a
Right.
song and then I produce a beat around my song. You see what I mean? Because I'm
Right.
naturally a songwriter first. And so JD being a songwriter as well, I just naturally lean toward that. And so that's why my beats are really simple like that, trying to emulate what I saw him do.
Right. Nice. Now, let's
Mhm.
get to that Sierra record here. Sierra and I, great record. And Sierra is not necessarily a vocal powerhouse like maybe a Beyonce, but what you did with her on that record,
Hmm.
you could still it still had feeling to it.
Yeah.
So, a lot of people don't understand that you don't have to sing and belt at the top of your lungs to bring feeling to a record. So, just talk about the approach with that record.
So a lot of people don't know this either. It's so funny. I be feeling like I be telling like these stories all the time. But Ciara, I actually was her very first vocal trainer. So
Mm,
shout out to Anthony Tate and TA. He found Ciara at 14 years old, 13 years old actually.
mm,
And so a friend of mine, my guy Al Jamal, who now manages another friend of mine, my guy Black Elvis. Al Jamal and I used to hang together every single day, right? Al Jamal he was in a group called 20 East. There was a rap group. And so Ciara used to live down the street from him. And so he would pick her up from cheerleading practice because she went to, she was a cheerleader. He would pick her up from cheerleading practice, bring her to my house to, so we could make records on her. Her dad would call at 8 o'clock and tell us we got to bring her home, the whole thing, right? And the And I record came out of me and Ciara having a conversation about this little boy that she had a crush on that was a basketball player, right?
mm.
And this is true story. So she says to me, this guy, I like this guy, and he plays basketball for the team, and da 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 da. And so I remember saying to her, sitting on the couch, I'm like, Cece, why you like the guy? Oh, because he played basketball, and I just always saw myself with a basketball player. I'm like, who cares? I mean, she's 14, bro. You know what I mean? So I'm like, who cares about a basketball player, Cece? Don't look for that. Look for a guy that's really gonna love the way that you want a guy to love you. Like, don't care. Who cares if he plays basketball? Who cares if he's a football player? He got money, whatever. As
Yeah,
long as he treats you right, that's all you need to care about. And she was
right.
like, okay, but I still want a basketball player. You know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff. And so that's why the very first line of that record is, I don't need me a basketball player. You know what I'm saying? All I need is somebody that's down for me. So it was kind of out of a for real conversation that she and I had when she was a 14-year-old girl.
Right. And I think the beauty of that record and a lot of records we're going to talk about shortly is that some might not have ended up being number one hits, but they ended up
Yeah,
being fan favorites. And I think that's an
100%.
underrated aspect is you got to make sure the fans and their core like the record as well.
Yeah, yeah. And
So,
and then, I was on Kaylani's live the other day, and she started playing And I and was like, this is one of my favorite records. So,
wow.
it's just you don't ever really know the impact you make when the records you
Mm,
make them. You just make them, and then you hope
right.
that people love them. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that
Yeah.
was cool for me to see her, singing every word, and that was really cool for me.
Yeah. So 2005 rolls along, and from this point on, for the next 4 or 5 years,
Yeah.
you're on every R&B album. You, B. Cox, I don't know between the two of you who has more placements during that time, but you guys are on every single album.
Yeah.
I think Brian told me one year you guys had like 70 something placements together. It was
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah.
Take me back to that era and what that was like from a creative standpoint. Like, do you think you could do that again?
Yeah. Well, here's the deal, right? So me and Brian had kind of got into a groove. We figured out the best way to work with each other. So Brian, it had got so crazy. Brian would be making the beat, like
Hmm.
literally like making it, and I would already be writing a song
Wow.
in my head, walking in the studio while he's making the beat. You know what I mean? Not waiting for him to be done. And Sam
Hmm.
would, our engineer Sam, that's also our brother Sam I am. He would be setting up the session already, knowing exactly how Brian wants the sounds to sound, how I like the auto tune to sound, whatever it is, right?
Right.
And so we just had kind of got into a groove where we could do like 3, 4 songs from scratch a day. You know what I
Wow.
mean? And I mean like no beat, no nothing. Walk into a room and come out, and at the end of the day, it'd be 3 or 4 records. You know what I mean? So, that during that time, it was just super, super cool. And you're right. I definitely would have my own. So like there would be times where me and Brian would have 2 records on the album, and then I would have my own 2 by
Yeah.
myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it just was a natural progression from me just being a songwriter, and then now having this wonderful partner who had so much success with JD and had his own success by himself. and then
Right.
I had my own success, and we just, it just naturally clicked. We traveled, like, labels would give us song deals, and we'd go to LA and be out there for 4 months, and just
Right.
have the label keep renewing our hotels and keep sending us artists. It was a wonderful time, man. We had a ball during that time.
I mean, between yourself, Brian, and Kendrick, that time and the chemistry that you guys have, you
Yeah.
guys were in just such a zone there. Are
Oh
you
yeah.
guys at that time aware of like you guys are in a zone and everything you guys putting out is just amazing? Because in
Yeah.
my perspective, everything you guys put out was just gold.
Yeah, thank you, man. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, shout out to Ken too. Ken like came in like a little thief in the night, man.
Yeah.
Because Ken is so unassuming. But then when you see him sit in front of that piano, out of here.
Yeah.
Out of here.
Yeah.
Ken, and he's another great piano player too. Them dudes really they figured out how to make that piano do what it's supposed to do, man. And then
Right.
what's funny is they're cousins, they're first cousins,
Hmm.
Becox and Kendrick. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about a couple of records during this era.
Hmm.
Say Goodbye by Chris Brown. That's one of
Yep.
the ones that stand out, obviously.
Yep.
Early on, you did some work with Chris. Just talk about those sessions.
Yeah. So Tina Davis brought Chris to us before he had a deal. And she was like, "Hey, I'm thinking of getting this kid signed at Def Jam, blah 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 blah." He was like, "All right, cool." So she brings him in. We do like 4 records on Chris in like 2 days. You know what I mean? Shout out to Raheem Devon. I saw you just came in. What up, bro, bro? So we do like 4 records on Chris in 2 days. Say Goodbye was one of those 4. The
Right.
other 3 ended up all being they actually took all 4 of them, and they ended up being on Chris's first album. Yeah, One
Mm,
More Again. Somebody said One More Again. Winter. Say Goodbye. So we had a few records that came on there, but from there, Chris was just super comfortable working with us, and so we ended up being able to do a lot more records with him. And we were able to do This Christmas with him, and we did the Try a Little Tenderness with him. So it really ended up being a great marriage for us with Chris. That he's still like my little brother.
and that Diagnosed with Love song,
Oh
oof,
yeah, yeah,
unreleased, but crazy record.
yeah, yeah, man. That whole album, it was crazy how that even happened. They played us. Tank had did this record. I saw you had Tank on earlier too.
Yeah.
He had did this record, and I can't remember the name of it. I want to say it was Picture Perfect or Picture Something. It was something
Okay.
like that. He had did this joint, and they was like, "Yo, this is the only record we got for the album. We starting the album all over with this one." We was like, "Okay, cool." So you know what I'm saying? We went in 2 weeks. We had a whole album done. Like
Mm,
literally, we did an entire album. Y'all, like some of the records that came out, like y'all didn't even get to hear a lot of the other ones. We did an entire album on Chris.
wow.
Yeah, and
Right.
they ended up only keeping a couple of them. They, got some Pharrell records and ended up, spanning out some. But we did a lot of records on Chris during that time in 2 weeks, bro. A lot of records. We had fun. We had super fun in Chalice in LA.
Right. So, I've always heard that Chris, especially early on, like he got it right away. He totally
Oh
understood
yeah,
what you guys were doing and he just picked it up immediately.
hundred
As a
percent.
vocal producer or even, working with someone in the studio, you're gonna have situations like Chris where they get it right away. What about
Mm-hmm.
those situations with artists that don't get it right away that you have to, I guess, work with them a little longer? How patient can one really be?
It gets tough.
Yeah.
It gets tough, but what I've learned is that most of these artists, um, they're not as confident as
Mm,
they lead on, right?
right.
And so you have to kind of, and you know what? I'm a victim of it too, right? So when I'm vocal producing, I'm sure of exactly how I want it to sound. I'm sure of where I want the song to go. When I'm singing in the booth, I have to like stop, listen, and then become an artist again, and then stop and then listen. Like, you know what I mean? So I get it. Like being those headphones, man, they change the game for you. When you behind them headphones and you listening back to your voice, it's tough. You know what I mean? But with somebody who really don't have the chops to pull it off, you just have to find out what they're great at and then stay there. You know what I mean?
Mm,
Like
yeah.
somebody like Mary. Mary J. Blige, right? Mary J. Blige's voice, the timbre of her voice, she makes you believe whatever it is that she's saying.
Right.
Whatever it is she's saying. She not finna go in there and outrun you like Brandy. Like Brandy can go in there and do anything with her voice. Whatever
Right.
you want to do, she can do it. It's not Mary's gift, but Mary's gift is she makes you believe, right? And so you
Mm.
just
Yeah.
you just sit in that pocket with Mary where she gets to soul you to death. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's kind of what you have to do.
Right. Love it.
Yeah.
So as the years progress, you do a bunch of work with Cherish. That was a
Hmm.
big one for you
Yeah.
guys.
Yeah.
And throughout the entire process, you're working on albums and then you're working on subsequent albums like a Chris. So is your approach then like how do you build from the first album that you're working with them on to the second one? Are you trying to continue what you've done? Are you trying to bring them something new? Like what's the process there?
Um, it just depends on the story that the artist wants to tell. So, a lot of times, for instance, we'll use Usher, right? So with Usher, not very many people know the Confessions album. The whole situation with finding out you got a girl pregnant and being with another girl and having to end this relationship and figure things out with the girl you got pregnant. You know, that actually was Jermaine's story,
Mm-hmm.
right? A,
Yeah.
a lot of people don't know that. Usher put the jacket on and he wore it well, right? And
Yeah.
so then Usher, had Here I Stand, and that was a different story. And so you just have to figure out whatever story the artist is trying to tell.
Right.
And that's something else I learned from Puff too, is that the entire album from start to finish should sound like a conversation. It shouldn't
Right.
be random thoughts tied together. That's why Thriller is still one of the greatest selling albums of all time, if not I think it is the best selling album of all time. Is because all those records have it's a conversation. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? It's a complete thought. It's not just we in the club popping bottles, we fucking bitches, and now we making money. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like it's an entire thought, and so you just dive into whatever that is, and you help the artist tell the story that they're trying to tell.
Right. So even during this time when you're working extensively with Brian and you're doing your own thing, you're also in the studio with Rodney Jerkins. You guys are doing songs as well with Dark Child.
Hmm.
Just talk about, those sessions right there, because like man, that Jay Holiday record Without You, that's one of my favorites.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
now, so Rodney, and you know, uh, speaking of that, I'd be remiss if I don't mention Big Shiz, my
Yeah.
brother. Rest in peace. I
Exactly.
love you, bro. But so that whole dynamic between that's another dynamic duo. Those two guys.
Oh yeah.
So I got the call to go and work with Rodney from my publisher.
Mm,
And so they was like, yo, Rodney wants to work with you. This was off of I Need a Girl, right?
mm,
And so Rodney wants to go work with you, wants you to come and work with him, blah, 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 blah. So me and my sister, Makiba Riddick, we both flew down to Orlando to work with Rodney, right?
mm,
In those 3 or 4 days, we was down there maybe 4 or 5 days, we did 17 brand new songs.
right.
No cap, right? 17 brand new songs in like 3 or 4 days. Out of those songs came the Avant records that me and Rodney did. It came the Mariah record that we did. It came the Ciara record that LaShawn did with Rodney. I can't leave him alone. All of those songs were written in that camp that we did those 4 days.
Wow.
Yeah, bro. I don't know what happened, but we was moving. We was moving.
Right. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna give you two records here, and I'm gonna go on record and say that these two are my favorite Adonis B Cox collaborations. Might be controversial. We might get some comments in here, but
Yeah.
first one is the Day 26 record, Since You've Been Gone.
Okay.
That record right there is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, so
Um,
so all the making the band, um, all the episodes that Puff did, I was involved pretty heavily. So like
Right.
people don't know, I wrote every theme song for making the band.
Mm,
So as the show would be coming on, the record that they was playing for the show to come on,
yeah.
I would write those, right? And so
Right.
the guys, Puff kind of put me in with the guys because the guys were very, very talented, but they were super raw, right? They were super raw. and they didn't really know how to connect that making a record and singing on a song are two completely different things. And they
Yep.
didn't know how to connect that. And so I kind of just, went in with the guys, and this one particular joint, they kept asking me for a Jodeci sounding song. Man,
Right.
we want a Jodeci sounding song. I'm like, yo, I try. Like, you know what I mean? But y'all don't got Jodeci sounding voices. But we're gonna
Mm.
try. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And so, that's how since you've been gone, I just can't seem to get right. And I miss you more than you know. You know what I mean? We was trying to do it in like a homage to Jodeci. You know what I mean? And that's
Yep.
how that joint came out.
That's dope. And then the other record that I'll say is one of my favorites from you guys is the Mariah Carey record, For the Record.
Oh yeah.
That's
Wow.
that's a
Yeah.
crazy record.
Yeah. Mariah is probably the most talented songwriter that's an artist that
Hmm.
I ever worked with. Ever. Right? Mariah, when we did those sessions, her process is something like it's so I'll explain. We literally like flew down to Anguilla with Mariah, and for 3 days, all we did was write melodies like
Right.
da 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 da's for 3 days. I promise
Right.
you. And then on the third day, she was like, "All right, I feel like we got it. Now let's
Right.
put some lyrics to it." Okay, cool. Whatever you say, MC. That's what we're doing. You know what I
Right.
mean? And so then we began to write lyrics. She literally sat down. We wrote line for line. I would come up with a line. She would come up with a line. Brian would come up with a line. I would come up with a line. Like it was literally like round robin, like that. Um, it was by far one of the most enjoyable songwriting sessions with an artist that I've ever had. And
Right.
like she really gets it. She gets it for real.
Yeah. Love it.
Yeah.
So, like I said, during this period, you guys are on fire, and as the years progress, R&B starts changing.
Yeah.
The industry starts changing.
Yeah.
You guys are still having some success. The Genuine record, of course, Last Chance,
Yep.
Monica's album. So you guys are still having success. But from your perspective, what kind of change? I know, like personally, Brian was saying you guys, like I think you got married, he had a kid, so
Yeah.
things changed from that perspective too. But just bring me to that era when things started changing. Like, how were you maneuvering through the industry then?
Um, I think Brian kind of hit it on the head. When we were younger, we
Yeah.
had the mentality of being the best producers in the world, right?
Right.
We didn't have any other obligations. We had no other responsibilities. We were only
Right.
responsible for ourselves. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And once you grow up and your responsibilities change, and you know, I found myself missing football practice, and I found myself missing, ballet recitals with my daughter, or whatever you know what I mean. I found myself missing those types of things, and it hurt. You know what I'm saying? So then you start to say, okay, well, I don't have to go on this trip. I can go on the
Mm.
next one. You know what I
Right.
mean? And then, before long, the industry is a fickle business, man.
Right.
And then now you got songwriters that were waiting their turn.
Right.
Like Rico Love. Like when Rico first came in, everybody always knew Rico was dope. He just
Right.
needed somebody to sing his songs. That's
Hmm.
it. That's it.
Right.
You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And so, we decide to focus on family and, do that. And then, people are looking for songwriters. And
Right.
so who shows up is the guy who's just as talented, if in some cases probably more talented, right? Guys like Rico Love, guys like Neo, guys like, um, young Atazio came through at that time. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Those guys come in, and then they're able to capitalize on the space where we are sitting out.
Right.
And so, we obviously we'll always get, like JD just sent me a beat yesterday for Usher. So
Right.
we'll always get the Usher records and the Mariahs and, our regular 1-2s. But when your focus shifts and you start to, realize other things are important, that's the only thing that changes.
Right. And
That's
well,
the only thing that changes.
I think the other aspect is during that time period, that's when that EDM era started kicking
Correct.
in. And
Correct.
I know you've been able to write those as well, but when you look
Yeah.
at it from an album perspective, that's six EDM records and six R&B records, as opposed to traditionally you're looking at 12 R&B records.
Correct.
So it was a
Correct.
lot of changes that happened during that time, but I know that didn't stop you. You were still writing at the time.
Yeah.
You started dibbling and dabbling outside of R&B. Just talk about that era for yourself.
Yeah. So, well, I moved to LA in 2010, 2009, 2010, right? Um, and when you go out to LA is such a different world, man. So, in Atlanta, everything is about culture, everything is about style, everything is about, cool. Everything is cool. It's style. It's culture. Like, it's very street driven. Everything, right? When you get to LA, everything is glitz, glamour. Um, I don't want to use the word fake, but pretentious. I'll use that word, right?
Sure.
And so the things that they care about are not as important as the things that people in Atlanta care about. And so
Right.
part of that is most of the culture in LA is very pop driven,
Yeah.
right? And so if you want to, I moved out there, I bought this big ass $1 million house, move out there, and I'm like, okay, I'm finna go flood these labels with these R&B records. And then these niggas was like, nah, we don't want that. You got some
Right.
pum tam pum tam pum tam pum tam. You got some of that? You know what I'm
Right.
saying? I'm like, nah, I ain't got none of that. So I'm like, okay, well, if I want to eat, I better figure out how to make some of that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And that's really how that came. It came out of it was born out of a necessity to try and branch out, and that's how I was able to do. You're probably talking about the Enrique Iglesias record,
Yeah.
and the Joe Jonas joint,
Yeah.
Kleptomaniac that I did.
Yeah.
It was just born out of a necessity to try and show people I'm not just a one trick pony by just doing R&B. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And it's fun to do those records. The approach is different, but it's very fun to do those records, and I have a greater respect for them now, especially because with Christiania, she's super, like, she grew up listening to R&B, obviously
Right.
with her family, but she's a pop girl, and
Mm,
so in order for me to be able to exist in the space to be able to create records for her, I
right.
had to tune my ear to that. You know what I mean?
Right. Love it. Love it.
Yep.
And can we just give a shout out one time for Nogacy?
Yeah, man.
That was your group.
Yeah, JQ, Antonio Dixon, my guy Tony Dixon, Eric Dawkins. Man, listen. So that joint, like, we were making fun of this guy. It was this guy in the Bay Area, and we saw the video, and we thought it was the most hilarious thing we had ever seen, right?
Yeah.
And so we was like, yo, why don't we just make a like a no name group and act like it's not us? You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? And so, like I said, and you see, once again, we went back to Jodeci, right?
Yeah.
The impact of, like, Boyz II Men sold more records, but the impact on the culture that Jodeci had is bar none,
Absolutely.
right?
Yep.
And so, it just became noticing, like, it was
Yep.
it was just something that we was doing for it. And just let you know, guys have nothing else better to do in the studio. This is what
Yep.
we do. You know what I'm saying? Like, we have nothing else better to do. You know what I'm saying? So we created a whole fake group and really cut records. Like, you know what I'm saying? It was fun though, man. It was super fun doing that. Them my guys too.
Those records were actually fire too. That's the funny thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And you guys had fans.
Yeah, bro. No, we had a wonderful time doing that. I mean, I really hope we can, like, really get back and do it again. That was one of the reasons too why I joined Clark Kent, was because of the amount of fun that I had doing
Mhm.
Jodeci. I mean,
Yeah.
Noticey, doing that. It kind of just reminded me of just being with my boys and having fun and making records, and not really trying to fit the format of a label or artist. We just having fun. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? It was
Yeah.
fun, man.
Absolutely. So I've seen a lot of comments in here talking about Chris Brown's 2012. Great
Yeah,
record right there.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So Chris called me to the studio, and I kind of knew he was finishing his album up. So he called me to the studio and was like, "Yo, can you? I need." He had a "Don't Judge Me, Please Don't Judge Me, and I Won't Judge." Right? He had that. And he was like, "Yo, can you make this joint?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah." Okay, cool. So I went back to the studio and kind of made what I felt like was a sister record to Don't Judge Me, and
Mm.
that's ultimately what that came from. And then Chris always wants me to write him a sex song. I don't know why, but he like always like, can you write me a sex song? Yes,
Right.
Chris. Okay, I'll write you a sex song, bro. You know what I'm saying? So we had fun doing that joint too.
Love it. And then because Raheem Devon is in here, let's give a
Yeah.
shout out to Crybaby. We love that record.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
that record was crazy too.
Yeah. So he actually that's Heem is another guy that really knows who he is too. So Heem came to the studio. I had a songwriter I was working with, a girl by the name of Georgia Rain. She was dope, super dope. So we had kind of had an idea already. And then I played him that beat, and he was like, "Nah, nigga, forget that other idea. This the one right here. This one." You know what I mean?
Mm.
And we kind of all just sat down and wrote that joint, and we had this idea to kind of copy "Fortunate," "Fortunate to have you, girl," right? And so
Yeah.
that's why you hear boom, 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 boom. We kind of modeled it after that. And he, to his credit, he knew exactly what he wanted to say, hopped in the beat, hopped in the booth and sung that joint down. He like Raheem is he's not a punch guy. He likes to
Right.
like, no, dog, just let me get it again. You know what I mean? And he would sing that joint he did his whole ad lib track all the way down one time.
Right.
One
That's
time,
awesome.
bro. Yeah, nah, he is dope. He real dope with
That's
that.
nice. So, just want to quickly touch on this. I interviewed Black Elvis a couple of years back when you guys
Hmm.
did the song "Bridge to Love" for Genuine. He was telling me that you guys did that song together over Skype, which at the
Yeah.
time is unheard of. And now with technology, you're not necessarily in the studio with the artist all the time. You guys can just send records to each other. Do
Oh
you think
yeah.
that takes away from the record?
No, no, not necessarily because when you know who you are as a creator, you're able to like, for instance, the doing the whole Skype thing and writing, like, over the airwaves and stuff was just it became something that we had to do because everybody had to, you know, I got something over here I'm doing, you got something over there you doing, I'm in LA, you in Miami, but the artist says, "Hey, can you get Adonis to write to this?" Or, "Hey, can you get Elvis to make a beat for us?" Yeah. So how we gonna do that? He in the middle of doing something else. The only way
Right.
we can do it is like this, right?
Hmm.
And so I don't think anything is lost in translation because he sent me the beat. I was playing it while he was, playing it on his side. So we was syncing it that way. And it was actually kind of cool. And I think if I'm not mistaken, the actual reason why we did it that way was because well, this is crazy. I got hit by a car and my leg
Oh
was
wow.
tore up. Yeah. And so
Oh
I
wow.
couldn't physically go to the session. Um, and so that was ultimately why it ended up happening that way.
That's
It was
crazy.
crazy, right? What am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
I can't walk. I got hit by a car. Like, you know what I'm
Right.
saying? You know what I mean?
Nice.
Yeah.
So let's fast forward here. I want to first off give you a shout out for the work that you do with Christina DeBarge.
Yeah.
Crazy stuff in there. You guys have done a lot together. That EP, I feel like that should have elevated her career, but her music is still great, so we want to give her a shout out. But
Yeah.
we're in 2020 now, Adonis, and so much has changed with R&B, and some of the key things that I look at as not necessarily weaknesses, but just things that are different than what we grew up loving.
Yeah.
First of all, it's the amount of melodyne and autotune that's being used,
Yeah.
and the requirement vocally, like it's not the bar is really low right now in terms of that. And
Yeah.
then along with that, it's the length of the records, and I think a lot of that has to do with streaming. If you can get a shorter song in, you can listen to it more times and repeat it over and over. So a lot of
Sure.
records now are like 2 minutes and 30 seconds. How do
Yeah.
you kind of approach your records when you're writing songs? Is that in your mind frame?
Well, my process is never gonna change, right? I'm going to always, create the same way. Now, whether
Yeah.
whether or not that's my little dog Gizmo. Now, whether or not people gravitate toward whatever the temperature
Yeah.
is that's up for debate. But as far as how I create, I'm gonna always create the same way, no matter what.
Right.
Now, what happens is you find yourself having to fit into a certain level of what you think is going to be accepted to place it or to sell it,
Right.
right? And so you're like, okay, well, if they're doing shorter songs, then I need to kind of gravitate more towards that. Cool,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then if people are writing shorter verses or whatever, right? So
Yeah.
cool. So you do those things to try and make sure that you are you know fitting into the landscape of what you have to sell, but your process should always stay the exact same. You should never
Right.
switch up your process. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? And so that's mostly what I try to do, is just stay true to whatever my process is, and then fix whatever the little things that need to change in order to fit into whatever people are doing today. That's it.
Right. That's
That's it.
awesome.
Yeah.
So before we get into what you're currently working on, you got exactly.
So now I was saying I have a label, I have an artist, a little rapper, this kid named Can Cool. He's
Mhm.
from my hometown. He's super, super cool. You guys can follow him on Instagram. His Instagram name is Real Can Cool. RealCanCool. I have him, and then obviously Christinia as well. We're focusing on getting her project out right now. Yeah, Chat Town Stand Up. What up, Kim? We focusing on getting her project done as well. And so that's ultimately what's excuse me, most important for me now. I'm doing, obviously, like I said, JD is reaching out to me. They're trying to finish Usher's album. Obviously, Sex Beat is out right now, going nuts. Don't
Yeah.
Waste My Time. They had a hit with that, and so they're basically, as you guys probably already know, this is the name of the album is Confessions 2. And so they're trying to recreate that magic from before. And so they're getting the same guys that were a part of that album. So they got Sean Garrett in there. Sean obviously did Yeah. Brian did Burn. I did My Boo. So they got the usual suspects back in again to get everything going. So that's really what I'm focused on mostly, is those two projects that are mine, and then trying to help Usher, and then seeing what else JD needs me to do.
Right. Love it.
Yep.
So, Donis, that was an hour with you. You went through all the history. I want to thank you for your time and just wanted to let you know we admire all the work that you've done in the past,
Thank
and
you,
we're going to
man.
look forward to everything you got going forward. So just keep us in the loop. You got we're going to support you no matter what.
Thank you,
So
bro.
keep us posted, man.
I appreciate it, man. And shout out to everybody that came in and joined. I appreciate you guys really, sticking with us and, loving my music this whole time. It really, for sure, makes me feel super appreciated. I really appreciate it, for real, from the heart. I appreciate it, y'all. Thank y'all so much.
All right, absolutely. Adonis, take care.
For sure, bro.
All right, so that was our interview with Adonis. I know a lot of people are asking me to put it up on YouTube. We will do that. We're gonna save the link, or save the video, and we'll post it on YouTube, and as well as that, we'll post it on our Instagram. We'll post 15-minute clips of it. I think that's the limit. So um, just follow us on Instagram. We got all the interviews, and if you want, go back. We've actually interviewed a lot of people over the last 2 weeks, from B Cox to Tank to the list goes on and on. So check it out, and we'll be back on, I think, tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow I'll be interviewing Bob Robinson from Tim and Bob, another legendary producer. So just stay tuned. We're trying to keep this culture of R&B alive, so just stay with us. All right, you guys take care.